to hand. Before I let you go from man to man, I'd rather drink.
Okay, I'd like to start the Architectural Board of Review meeting for today, Tuesday, May 29th. First item on the agenda is public comment. Is there any member in the audience that would like to speak on an item not on today's agenda? Seeing none, I will close that portion of the meeting. And item 2, I understand we're going to be postponing until 2 weeks from now, Tony, the review of the approval of the minutes of May 14th, postponing that. All right, so moving on to the consent calendar for May 21st, and then today, May 29th. So can I have a motion to approve the minutes from the consent calendar of Monday, May 21st?
So moved.
Made by Keith, seconded by Paul.
All right, consent calendar last week, we had item A, 220 Nogales Avenue was approved as submitted. Item B, 2015 Red Rose Way was continued indefinitely. And consent last week was reviewed by Chris Gilliland.
All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. And then we have the consent calendar for today, May 29th. Can I have a motion to approve that? Motion made by Paul.
Second motion.
Seconded by Keith.
Okay, consent calendar today was item A, 501 Ninos Drive, got a final approval as submitted. Item B, 718 and 720 San Pascal Street, got final approval with condition, 2 conditions. Item C, 3707 State Street, got a final approval of details and revised landscaping. Item D, 320 and 322 West Canon Perdido Street was continued indefinitely. Item E, 1016 Castillo Street, got a final approval with a condition. Consent today was reviewed by Paul Zink and Chris Gilliland.
All right, thanks, Tony. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, continuing on to announcements. Tony, any announcements?
No announcements.
No announcements?
Chair.
Yeah.
And Tony, Paul and I discussed we're going to do the trade-off for consent, so I'll begin doing the consent calendar next week.
Next Monday. Okay. All right, thank you.
Keith, what are we doing today? Oh, I saw you over there today.
Down the side.
It's doing signs. Any more announcements?
I'm going to step down for number 5. I have an obligation.
Okay.
Be leaving the meeting early.
So you're leaving early, you're not stepping down?
I'm sorry, I'm leaving early.
Okay.
Correct.
Madam Chair, if the meeting goes past 6:05, I'll need to leave as well.
No, I'm sorry. You can't. Just kidding. Okay. All right. Any more announcements? Okay. Subcommittee reports? None? Okay, we're moving on to item 1, 1130 North Milpa Street. This is a continued item. It's the 3rd concept review, comments only. Project requires environmental assessment and compatibility analysis. This is the improvements to the Santa Barbara Bowl. And the comments we made at the last meeting, which was on April 16th, were an indefinite continuance. The motion was to study additional methods of designing the building to be more compatible with the existing dryer administration building by either incorporating additional material and or color choices from elsewhere on the site, by either incorporating additional materials and or color choices from elsewhere on the site and surrounding neighborhood. Number 2, the proposed queen palms may not be compatible with the site. Use an irregular planting pattern for the oak trees. Number 3, study the possibility of utilizing various roof materials and forms from the site and surrounding neighborhood. Your name for the record.
Steve, microphone.
Oh, yeah, and you have to turn it on. There we go.
I'm Steve Carter with Designer.
Trish Allen with Suzanne Elledge, Planning and Permitting.
Susan Van Nett is, I think, on probably show up to.
Okay. Okay.
So I'll just walk through and point out the changes that we've made since last time you guys saw us. Site plan concept's pretty much the same. We have added a roof element, which I'll show you later, over the administration portion of the building. And then I think last time we saw the cul-de-sac that was on the drawings at that point. We have, just to point out that this wall, it's 4 feet tall here. At the gate structure, it goes to 7 feet tall. And then we step down here 8 feet and 7 feet on that side of the wall as we're chasing the hill down. We've also added a retaining wall along the north property line. And again, I'll show you that once we get into sections. And I think that's pretty much the changes that have been made on that sheet. The floor plan is the same as what we have shown before. And then what we have done is we've added a gable roof to the administrative wing on the structure with steel trusses. And that's picking up what we've done other places on the bowl also, Wendy McCobb Pavilion specifically. The restroom building here remains the same, and then the roof structure, you can see that dotted here, is showing up in the background and showing up in these sections. This is the retaining wall we added on the north property line in order to be able to get the gable roof to tuck into the hillside.
Show the varying heights of that wall.
This wall, it peaks out at 8 feet tall, and then it slopes down both sides till it flushes out with the grade at both ends. So elevation-wise, we still have the stone wall on Milpas Street. Behind that, we have a rubble stone wall that forms the end of the restroom building. And then 46 feet back beyond that is where our building is. We have a chimney element, and you can see the gabled roof and the truss elements at the end. Looking at this elevation, the south elevation, recycling the stone wall that we're using off Milpas, so it's the same rectilinear stone rubble wall on the restroom. And then we've created this is the north wall of the building, which we're treating as an organizational wall or a found wall. And we have used slump stone on that wall, picking up what's been used on the Dreyer building. We have the front of the building as a plaster face. We've used our rubble stone wall, underneath the windows and at miscellaneous walls as we go up the canyon. Standing seam metal roof. And then in the background, you can see the planted retaining wall on the north property line. And this is the approved apartment building on the property adjacent to our site. East wall, again, windows, we have rubble stone and then a plaster wall. And then this stone wall here is our slump block wall. And then a sketch from Milpas Street. So you can see our new roof elements. We have a chimney structure up front, trying to give it more of a residential scale. the height of the ridge is 16 feet above finished floor, 16 and a half feet above finished floor. And that's what's going on in that sheet.
Did you show this picture right there? The photos of the bowl of
Yeah, if you guys want to see,
we're at concerts.
yeah, we have a model of the building if you guys need to see it. But here's the, existing bowl structure. So we have plaster here, plaster down here. This is cut stone, and this is what we've used typical on our lower walls, is the rubble stone everywhere. You can see the same photo here in materials we're typically using. You can see the truss elements in the Wendy McCaw building. It's the plaster we've used behind the pavilion. This you can see the truss element, which will be similar to that. We'll have, wood soffit, but that type shape. And that's on the interior, just open and airy on the inside, which we'll be doing. And do you guys need any more street shots? This is coming in from going down Milpas. Gas station across the street from us. Looking back at the dryer building and the stone wall that's existing. Looking back down the street. And then at the end of Milpas is the big apartment projects that exist there.
Okay. Thanks, Steve.
Do you have anything, Susan, on the landscape that we would like to?
The landscape is very similar to what was presented previously. We do have a vine that would cover the wall.
This wall here?
Yes, and I'd like to point out that we are also mitigating the trees that are being affected with the planting on this adjacent slope.
Susan, where were the queen palms that we mentioned in the minutes?
We had them on the south property line on the county.
And you
county
still have
property.
those?
No.
Oh, okay. What did you replace those with?
Go ahead.
We're still working with the fire department on that.
Okay, so that's an outstanding comment that we'll be dealing with. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak on this item? No? We have staff comments. Do you have anything you want to add?
I just want to ask a question, actually, about the new wall behind the building. If there's going to be another fence on top of that, if so, if it's over 8 feet, it would be a modification required. So I'd just like clarification about that.
We would
At this
prefer
point.
not adding anything to the top of it, and let, when they develop the property adjacent to it, have them, if they want a security fence up there.
Okay.
No fence for now. Is that what you're saying?
So now
No
it would be
fence for
just
now.
8, it would be a maximum of 8 right now.
Maximum of 8 feet,
So-
right?
That approved project has a property line fence. If that gets developed, there's a fence along there. Not much usable space. The buildings are.
The adjacent property has a fence approved for a development?
That's right.
And it's not in the same line as this retaining wall?
It's in that, on that property line, yes.
And the wall's on the property line? Mm-hmm. Then you're going to be over 8 feet? If you put your wall and then they have their fence, you're going to be over 8 feet?
It could be 5 feet away and then therefore not.
Right,
don't
that's
know
why I asked that
exactly.
question.
I see, yeah. It could be that
That's
it's
your
separate.
concern, right?
Yeah, it is. And I guess, plus, even if they don't develop there, I'm not sure whether it would be needed or not. I guess I need to look at that more carefully because people could access that site at any time next door.
And fall off.
Right, so we need to look at that. And I guess the question to you is if it's higher than 8, it's required to be, are you in support of that mod to allow it to be higher?
Well, so far, it's not proposed to be higher than 8. And
If there's a fence on top of it, I think what Kathy's pointing out, if it's right on top of
So
it,
that's
it
why
will
I
be.
asked you, what are you proposing right now, so we can comment on it? So
Are you saying we have to have a fence on that?
It may be that you have to. I haven't looked into it that carefully.
Okay.
I know
We're
it,
proposing not putting a fence on top of it.
Okay. Well, you're not going to get, it looks like you still have comments only anyway.
Right.
So you have some time to resolve that,
Okay.
right? Okay. Okay, questions from the board? Anybody have questions? Anybody?
How tall is the existing dryer bridge building to its ridge?
I don't know without scaling it off, I would guess.
Less
it's
than 20, but more than 15?
Probably.
Okay.
Probably more than
Chris?
I have a few questions.
Go ahead.
Let's see. These, the entry planters, this will be easier to show up there. Just curious, will these trees be centered in these planters? Or
No, we're trying to keep the line there, and then we'll plant,
Okay.
to balance them out in front.
All right.
And it'll probably be relatively low planting because we have to keep that height under the 42 inches. Yeah.
Okay. And then what is this material here?
It'll be enhanced paving. We haven't selected anything at this point.
I see.
At this point in time, probably end up matching what we do here.
Is it possible then to make this what's called as concrete? Is it possible to make that the same material?
Yeah, we can get all those to match.
Okay. And then what is the dimension of these bollards here? It's like they're 36 high.
They haven't been designed yet. Probably about 18 inches square,
Okay.
something like that.
And then is there any reason that there couldn't be an extension of the planter in front of this condenser unit wall?
We could do that.
Okay. And then
Trying to get something growing on the wall is what you're saying?
actually just to provide a little foreground, just to
Yeah.
soften it up a little bit.
Okay.
That's all I have for questions.
Okay. Any more questions? Stephanie?
I have the same question.
Do you have questions?
No.
Okay, yeah.
The standing seam is copper like the other structures.
It may be metal and painted the same color. We have 2 roofs up there that are copper and 1 roof that is painted metal, penny brown color. And they all look the same. It's kind of a budget issue.
Kirk?
Sure. So the parking lot does not require planting strips or additional landscaping?
The parking lot, we're not proposing anything in this area. We have, we need that area for semi-trailer trucks and the buses to maneuver, and the counties agreed with that proposal.
And I wanted to add that within the design team, we experimented with a lot of different tree locations, but in every instance, it ended up being a tree that would get clipped by a big truck. So we really thought that through.
Any more questions? Okay. Comments? Chris, you want to start?
So I guess, why is this so loud? Just piggybacking on the material call-outs for the little walkways, it'd be nice to match those with the plaza material. Comment to extend, well, actually, this will be easier again up here, but it's kind of two comments combined. I'm wondering if there would be a possibility also to sort of soften this line. So it's sort of, we're bleeding in a little bit softer with if these are pavers, maybe it could be not a curvy line necessarily, but sort of in out, and then maybe it could extend into this area for an additional planter. Does that make sense? Yeah. I think that was it for comments. I think everything else was addressed.
Thanks, Chris. Kirk?
Thank you, Chair. I'm really impressed by the changes you made to the material choices on the walls, the exterior walls of the building since the last time we reviewed it. I think it's remarkable. Now that it's fitting in better with its context, both in relation to what you've done previously with the bowl and also to the street context. And I think it's just the way it's dug in, and the flat roofs in the front, and the stonework. I think it's really, really nice. So I appreciate all the changes you made.
Thanks, Kurt. Gary?
Yeah, I'm really pleased at the changes that are made. The use of the stone and the blend of old Santa Barbara and new architecture as well. I think that it's a great project, and I'm really happy. I like the roof. I like the standing seam roof. I like the chimney, the way that it's treated with the chimney to add a little bit of residential, and the grabbing of the slump stone. I think it's very good. It's a very nice project.
Thanks, Gary. Paul?
I'll agree with all of that. Another comment that I would make that's different is I'd be all right with the 42-inch guardrail on top of the retaining wall. I think we have a responsibility to prevent people from falling if it's greater than more than 30 inches. So if that requires a mod and you're going to the Planning Commission, that's something that I could support.
Okay. Keith?
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with all the previous comments, and I'd be supportive of a mod if required on that fence. I don't know if there's a prickly plant you can do up there to mitigate that. But yeah, I think all the material choices, really work with all the buildings on the sites. I think you did a great job there. I might have you reconsider the chimney. I think that might be going a little too far. But I think that's your choice, and then maybe just throw out the suggestion of maybe using the cut stone on the building and let the rubble stuff just be in the landscape, kind of like you've done up top. But yeah, I think it's looking really good.
Stephanie? Okay. I feel the same way. I'm really impressed. I think it's so much more in keeping with everything else that you've done up on the Hill, and I really appreciate your willingness to work with us and the comments that were made at the last meeting. So this would be an indefinite continuance, and the project will then go to, this would be sending it on to the Planning Commission. So does somebody want to take a stab at comments that would be forwarded on to the Planning Commission?
Madam Chair? I'm
Yeah,
sorry to
go ahead,
interrupt.
Trish.
Before, that would be great. I spoke to staff about this last week, too. We did present the changes to the stone wall near the Luena turnaround to you last time, but those do also trigger mods because of our two front yard situations. So I just want to make sure that I believe the board was fine with those walls last time, but it is a modification condition, so I want to make sure we get those comments in the minutes as well.
Thank you for bringing that up, because one of the questions I had, and I didn't ask, was, do you have a section through that area so that we can see the street?
Not yet.
With or elevations or with something other than a plan view showing these are there, since they're high walls.
Civil.
I don't have it with me. We have it on civil, I think.
Yeah, we have it on our civil because we're getting ready to get back into DART. They'll be beautiful.
So does everybody understand what, that's why I was asking to see or was going to ask to see the section, but everybody understands the heights of the walls. There's a wall that goes from 4 feet to 7 feet here in height. And
basically the road. We're constant on the top of this, and the road drops back down. So that's what's giving that 4 feet to 7 feet.
And so it's 7 feet from this side.
Yes.
And moving up to 4 feet here. And then this wall is an additional 5 feet?
For most of it.
5 to
yes.
7?
Yeah, it obviously thins out through there.
Madam Chair?
Yeah, go ahead,
Question
Kirk.
about the walls. So they would be plaster?
No, these would be stone.
Oh, all stone?
Landscape.
We don't need under discussion because we haven't made a motion yet, so you can just... No, but thank you for prompting me. Susan, can you talk into the mic? Thanks.
We have a list of plants to choose from, so we could make sure, as we move forward, that we put in planting that would help to screen that wall.
Okay. You have a question, Kirk? You're looking at me.
Trying to make a motion.
Okay.
Now, you don't need to come back to us, or do you, for final?
They have to come back after planning commission.
After
You
planning
do?
commission.
Okay, so
We
this
need
is more than a
conditional use
courtesy
permit.
review, the way it's mentioned in here, then.
No.
Oh.
This is required.
It's a,
It just says in the,
Comments for planning commission.
yeah, but it also says,
he's saying that they were here to initially as a courtesy review because it's a
courtesy review
county-owned
by the
piece of
Architectural
property.
Board of Review.
No, actually,
Requested.
half of it is. I described it at one
not
point.
this
It's
half.
complicated. Part of it's on the property owned by the foundation.
That's right.
And that's your purview, courtesy review of the parking lot area
Mm.
and the other hillside.
Okay. So, indefinite continuance to the Planning Commission with the following comments. The board
I know.
feels that...
Madam Chair,
the-
can I just
Yeah.
interrupt at this point? The compatibility analysis needs
Right.
to be part of the motion as well.
Right,
Just a reminder.
yeah. So I don't think there's anything that I'm about to say that would contradict just lumping that compatibility analysis into the comments or to the motion. That in regards to the architecture of the administration building and the landscape design, that they are exceptional in character and fitting not only with the remodel that has gone on with the rest of the county bowl, but also with the historic building nearby at the street. And the board appreciates the use of traditional materials. Some board members felt that the chimney element at the street could be removed. And in regards to the modifications, the board finds them acceptable and not having an aesthetic impact, but upon return would like to see elevations and details of all the new retaining walls being proposed at Lowena Drive. Is that considered Lowena? Yeah. Along with planting that's to occur adjacent to those walls, gates or other features associated with those walls. And then there were some landscaping comments on it. Why don't you formulate that?
Okay, in addition, for the landscaping, would be
Do you want to second that motion and then,
yeah,
make
sure.
the comments?
I'll second that. And under discussion, to soften the edge of the hardscape line between the begonia garden, is that what we're calling that, and the plaza area, and to extend that planter in front of the retaining or the freestanding wall that screens the condenser unit. And then also to match the hardscape type for the crosswalk area from the dryer building to the new box office building, as well as the apron adjacent to the handicap parking area.
Thanks, Chris. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right, we are
That's right.
a little bit ahead. Are we allowed to? No, this is final review. So, can we go ahead and see this? Or 9 minutes.
Yeah, our policy is we can begin
We can
up
begin.
to 15 minutes early.
Okay, so we're going to move on to item 2, which is 822 East Cannon Perdido. Oh, maybe they're not even here yet. I'm looking for an 822 East Cannon Perdido representative. Okay, going once, going twice. We're ready for you. All right. So- I'll go ahead and while you guys are setting up, read the minutes from the last meeting. This is from a meeting on February 6th. The motions was to, maybe instead of read them, do you want to go through them one by one?
Yeah, we have those. We
Okay,
can do it that way.
let's do that. Or I could read them off. Study changing the small existing interior gables to shed roofs. Do you want to do it that way, or do you want to do it a different way?
We'll do a quick intro, and then I'll briefly hit those, and then we're kind of actually here. One change would be actually here as an in-progress review. I
Okay.
know we're agendized as final, but we actually had a change that we're kind of here to get some input
Okay.
over.
Go ahead.
I'm Ryan with DMA.
And Edward Devaseni with DMA.
So as you were starting last time we presented, project was granted project approval, and then since that time, the teams have been actively pushing through DD, starting CDs, and with this project, pretty importantly, doing a value engineering exercise. And that really spurred one of the changes that we want to review with you today. And then as well, Habitat, you've probably noticed in the papers, is actively pursuing families and meeting with potential residences to get them ready to move in. So let me hit these quickly. So number one was changing the small existing gables. So that's actually still part of our study, and we'll have that locked in for our first official final review next time. Number two was study alternatives to the roof here addressing Cannon Perdido, which we've done and we'll review with you. Then study options for introducing landscape. Yes, we'll be doing all the landscape studies for next time. We'll bring Courtney with us. And also providing you that conceptual landscape plan for that adjacent Taco Bell property as well. So let's start with kind of most important, as I said, was that value engineering study. And out of that exercise, which was somewhat of a surprise to us, was a comparison of the all fiber cement siding project to actually introducing some stucco to the project. And it proved to be pretty cost effective to introduce stucco over as much of the project as we could. So we did a few studies and essentially have introduced, I'd say, approximately 2/3 stucco into the project. So this is what spurred our in-progress review to kind of get some input now before we button things up for final review. So starting with the kind of the street facade of the project. So this little corner cottage building we left completely in the siding material. And then on this little corner Craftsman, we split it. So we did a half stucco at the base and a half siding at the top. And then this little more farmy facade went to stucco. So we kind of had a split here in the front. Let's go to this long elevation. And then, so here's our driveway elevation. This is the long building C facing to the west. So here's that front building again where we do the high and low split for these two units, which are similar. We're still kind of respecting the units with different colors. And then the large 3-story portion we split in two. So this building, or virtual building, went to stucco. And then we broke that with a little 3-story townhouse in siding, and then moved back down towards the rear in the back of the project with stucco for these two units. And then on the other side, the building B, you can see we actually made building B the triplex, an all stucco building. And then this is, we're seeing the side of, that's that front building set back on Canon Perdido. Let's see. Here's our triplex from the driveway again, so this is the entry. This all went to stucco with one color change, and that's a facade shift. And then the back side of our long eastern building, or sorry, western building, the long building, you can see is mostly stucco, except we break that one 3-story townhouse with siding and then the front. So that's really the big change that we were here to review, and we can either discuss that first and or move to some of the other little studies.
Let's do your whole presentation, and
Okay.
then we'll come back.
Okay. Go to the front elevation now. So one of the other, I thought, significant looks we had was studying this. It was the friendliness to the street. So we took some of the comments. This was more desirable situation, the open gabled porch entry. So we brought the same, and we'll be detailing it differently, but open that up to this, and this sort of shows the dynamic of how the first story actually does step out from the second story mass above. So we have a little shed roof, and then we turn and project a little farther over the entry with this now open gable. So that's this. I thought that was helpful to see in view as opposed to elevation. And then another piece that's new, it's fairly small, in the rear, in the common open area behind Building C, we've introduced a little shed structure similar to the bike structure we had to house the green waste that's part of the rear yard. So those are really the exterior changes we have for now. And then actually go to the site plan. We had one floor plan change that came out of sure. You know, there's a little bit of finessing of doors and windows and floor plans. Really, our footprint is locked in, but really the only real change to the footprint is back here, Unit 6, where we have been working to accommodate a fully universal unit. We hadn't worked in a laundry facility for that unit yet. So if you remember previously, this back corner was notched out and still covered by the roof. It had a little porch, but we kind of had to annex that corner to have enough clearance to have a real workable, realistic laundry area for a truly universal unit. So this is sort of a corner we grabbed. But other than that, the floor plans are more or less the same. Other things we've improved upon were, our utility areas that we've designated as we get through DD are shrinking. So we kind of accommodated more than we needed. And this fire closet, which originally was in front, we're able to get around the corner and out of view. And let's see. Did I miss anything then? I think that's really it. Again, the primary reason for us to be here was to get a feedback regarding the stucco.
All right.
And I guess in short, our request is just that feedback, and then we'd like to get locked into coming back in 2 weeks for our first final approval review.
Your first final?
Yeah, this we want to consider. This is our in progress, just for this big change. And
You
then
mean your final?
final. Yes.
Okay. Your first review at final approval?
Correct.
In case you don't get it first. Okay. All right. Do we have anybody in the audience that would like to speak on this item? Okay. I'll turn back to the board with questions. Stephanie, do you have any questions? No? No. Keith?
Just a simple one. Are there places in town that have green stucco?
Green stucco.
Isn't that what you're proposing here when you say there's plaster on the bottom, but it's colored green?
Yeah, painted, correct. Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, here's a couple of loosely inspiration. This was just in the neighborhood. This is almost kitty corner to us at Milpas and Cannon Perdido. So sort of a similar palette as far as this was just an inspirational imagery, just to see kind of some of the detailing, how it would work with stucco, kind of proving to ourselves how we might do this. But as far as painted green, I can look for samples. I don't have one available.
Can you turn that mic on, Ryan? Sure. Thanks.
And also, I believe there's one on Castillo Street. There's a triplex that was done 5 years ago and was slowly constructed, Castillo and near Coda and Ortega. And that's got green with white trim, it's stucco. Right. It actually is very similar to this with stucco and siding. It's a pretty good example of this building.
Isn't that the one right next to your house?
There's one next to my house. It's a duplex.
Isn't that green stucco? Yeah.
It's not painted.
Integral.
So it's integral plaster.
Well, they reversed it though. They got wood on the bottom and stucco on top.
Do you have any more questions? Do you have any questions, Karen? Yeah.
That was my question actually. Do you have any instances where these you have wood below stucco?
Wood below stucco? I mean, we have this one that's right around the corner from us.
No, I meant on
your
your
project.
project. I don't care about somebody else's.
Let's go to the elevations, actually, because we're going to be talking about this.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, are there any instances where you have stucco above siding?
No. We have basically, there's
Wood above
there's
stucco.
three ways. There's an all stucco, there's an all siding, or just these two units are siding above, stucco below.
Okay, great. That's my question. Thanks.
Kirk, questions?
Yeah, I just, trying to figure out height at the second floor for the westerly unit, this front unit. It's 9 feet, but then there's a. And you're showing the floor level beyond. So that's what's odd, I guess. On sheet A430, it shows the plate height at the second floor is 41.1, and it gives a line for it. But then the actual plate height, the way it's drawn, looks like it's another foot higher. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because I'm still struggling with that front elevation. And it just seems really tall. Is that just a?
He's got an 8-foot plate height on the third floor.
I can perhaps
Right?
speak to that. And this is for the roof starts?
I'm talking about the second floor plate height. Yeah, where the roof starts.
Yeah, and that's throughout the entire project. These the trusses that we're using are called energy healed trusses, and where the plate ends, they're a good 14 or 16 inches. We'll determine that, so the insulation can go all the way to the exterior to meet where the wall is. So it's a place rather than the trusses coming down to a few inches. That's why that you see that difference of where the plate is and the roof starts.
Go ahead, Gary.
On the stucco issue, the banding that you have on the in between floors, what material is that going to be?
On the
Between
on the stucco buildings, we would do stucco.
So that'll be a
On-
stucco band?
Yes, and on any building that is either all siding or even half siding, we will have wood banding.
So that was going to be, and that was going to be painted a different color. Is that what you're?
Yeah, could be.
Okay.
Kirk, yeah, go ahead.
3.0. So I don't know if this happens anywhere else, but it looks like the tails that you've got on that open beamed roof element over the entry, the rafter tails looks like it's like a foot overhang or so past the supporting beam, whereas at the second floor it's like 3 feet. So I'm just wondering, is that like a motif you've got going on, or why we only have a short little rafter tail there?
Yeah, well, these porches, as we tighten up, what's new up here on the second and third levels are the fascia. We actually hadn't been showing those before, so we've modeled those in. And just to be honest, it looks like we hadn't gotten to that front porch yet. What I'm thinking is, one of the reasons is because we're offset from the shed, so we cut them where they land and align with the rafter tails on the shed portion, I think is what's driving that. It looks like what's driving that.
Any more questions, Kirk? Chris? No questions?
One more question. Sorry.
I had a couple. Go ahead.
What is the material of those window shade awning structures that you're showing over windows? A little eyebrow.
Yeah, they're wood structures. Trying to see. We don't have details with us this time. I'm trying to see if there's an elevation that shows them. So they're rigid wood awnings. So 2 brackets with a slat space. We're currently detailing that. Is there any place we can show that? They're more back here.
They show in some of your sections.
They'll return with details. Any more questions?
Yeah.
No. I had a couple. What did the... Can you go to the front Cannon Perdido elevation again? When you were here last time, from last time to this time, did you, other than the materiality, did you make any changes to the massing of the structures at all?
The only thing I can think of is we've been getting more accurate with the model. So the truss is the only thing I could think of. I don't know. We maybe have changed by inches per what Ed just described, the types of trusses that we've now introduced, but we were compensating for that already.
The overall height of the structures stayed the same. We've
And the massing, like what I'm talking about is, for instance, this being a 2-story single gable, and then the single gable here and the little shed roof, the massing and the roofing did not change.
Yeah.
No, the only change was on the back of the long building where we did capture this corner where there was a porch before and the bedroom came out to facilitate adding the laundry into the unit for the fully accessible unit. That was the only piece that changed for the envelope.
Okay. And then, I mean, I don't know why I didn't see this before, but that garage that you have to do a U-turn to get into, not that it's any of my business, but how do you get in there?
Yeah, it's a turn.
It is. It's pretty wide. And transportation looked at. We worked very closely with transportation through the DART process, and they weren't very happy about this particular one, but which is one of the reasons why this portion is pushed further back.
Okay.
But we got it to a point where they were satisfied, and we have wider than required doors at all the garages to facilitate the maneuvering. As we really worked unit by unit with transportation.
Okay, great. Stucco band. You said that I'm trying to visualize what that would look like.
We're looking at that. We're open to either. The discussion was a detail with wood banding and stucco, just especially for the pure stucco buildings. We could do wood banding, just have a detail where it's proud and the stucco top and bottom just runs into it. Or, a more cost-effective method would be a molding piece and stucco. So I think we're okay with either. I mean, no.
The window would be wood.
Windows, we would still like wood. But we're open to that input.
Okay,
We
I
weren't
was
sure on the
looking at
banding.
Okay, a comment.
One last
One more
question.
question.
Was there previously an apron, a sill apron on your windows?
There was, and what
Tony, can I see the project design approval set? I'd like to see that, actually.
there was, and I think what we're going to look at is having two types, basically. So a detail for the stucco
Stucco.
buildings now, and a detail for like the wood siding would have the apron, and maybe the stuccos would not. So we're going to look at having two types like that.
Okay. So comments?
I'll dive in.
Go ahead.
I'm okay with the mix of the plaster and the wood, with the exception of where the two are in the same structure. I think there needs to be a color change, just so that you're differentiating between the materials rather than trying to blend it in. And on the banding, I think I would favor wood and not the plaster. There's some recent examples in Goleta that have plaster that aren't too attractive. And I'm fine with your little plan shifts. I think those are really minor and not an issue. I'm still not sold on that gable front porch. I think that thing just kind of looks like it's hanging there in space. So I really think you should abandon the gable form and try some sort of shed there or something. But the proportions and everything, it's just kind of awkward that it's not supported. So. And then the little tweaks here and there on the trim and that, I think, as long as you're consistent, that's fine. Those things.
Okay, thanks, Keith. Stephanie, are you ready to make comments?
The gable on the Canna Perdido side, I'm not sure what unit this is, but the one on the left, not liking the truss detailing.
Which truss detailing?
The members not coming to
Oh,
the
there.
center, not meeting in the center. Maybe that's what's bothering me about it. But the gutters not aligning with the corner trim is another detail I noticed around the rest of the project. And these outriggers, would you call them? These not aligning with the corner trim as well. Kind of is unusual to me, an unusual detail, keeping it inside. And then you said you're going to have some resolution with the sill aprons. I'd be in favor of heavier trim all around with a nice craftsman detail. And those shade structures, albeit great for shading the windows and all that, concerned that they look a little too lightweight and flimsy on some of your sections that I saw.
Is that it, Stephanie?
That's it.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Forever? Oh, okay. Gary?
Yeah, in general, I'm okay with the stucco change. There are some detailings that I'm having some issues with. One would be the plaster band, also the corners being wood, trying to make the plaster look like it's a craftsman is not, I don't think, the best move. I think that the corner, if you're going to go plaster, you need to be true to the plaster when you're doing that and not try to make it look like craftsman that's plaster. I think it needs to have plaster corners if you're going to do that. I would like to see rather than plaster all the way up to the gables, I would rather see some sort of wood detail, not just the beams, not just the girders, but maybe a wood skirting just at the bridge of the or at the gable portions. Maybe not all of them, but certainly some of the street-facing ones, that we get a little bit more detail out of it. But take some of that detail away from the corners. And I would agree with Stephanie about the aprons on the bottom of the windows. I think an apron on the bottom of the window really helps that window stand out, gives the sill a little bit more validity. And I'm with Keith on the entry. It's just not there. I mean, I don't know if I'm with him as far as going to shed roof goes, but it's so planted on, and I know it's in the setback, and we can't really ground it, and I know that's an issue, but I've seen other projects where we've given them a mod just so they can ground it, just so it looks like an entryway and not a planted. So I would be in 100% favor of grounding something right there, so we got an entrance, even if it is a mod, because it adds a lot more value and character to the project if you can have some type of entry. So I'm not really opposed to the gable that comes out there, because that really gives you a focal point of where the entry is. And I like that gable, but I'm just not liking this one. So I wish you could go for a mod and ground it. That would be mine. And that's it.
Thanks, Gary. Kirk?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I may have missed some of the previous comments, and so excuse me if I repeat some of them, but my view is I think the combinations and alternations of plaster to wood siding is acceptable, and that could actually help the project. The one thing I would want to see is wherever you have plaster and siding on the same building, that you don't use the same color. And generally throughout the project that you shift the color where you're using the siding so it doesn't start to look like a faux material. So, and that it distinguishes the material as being what it is. And the main focus of my attention has been on the two elevations facing the street. The one closest to Milpas, I think, is especially this left-hand side is working really well. I mean, it's really handsome, even though it's very simple. Yeah, and I'd like to see that kind of simple, traditional wood frame character with the rest of it. This thing seems kind of forced, even though I appreciate what you're doing is getting some shadow lines and depth and actually adding another front porch. But I think it's maybe like Keith is saying, it's the gable end truss that makes it look like it's just a plant-on to, decorative plant-on. Whereas you don't get that feel at all here. This all looks like it's real, it's functional, it's simple, it's well composed. So I'm tending with Keith that I think this ought to be a shed. And maybe that's the answer here too. But I think there's other problems with this as well. The fact that, this is, building-wise, this is a 9-foot plate height, but it's a 10-foot-2 plate height visually because of the trusses that you're using there. And then you've got this low little plate in front. It looks out of proportion in relation to the one-story element in front. It's overwhelming it. And because this is such a small projection, it all starts to look fakey again. So my suggestion is that probably changing this to a shed is going to help it, but also lifting this plate height. You've got lots of room here that you could bring that up so that the one-story element, so the two-story element doesn't dominate so strongly. And then I think also I appreciate you're trying to add some detail here at the gable end, but this is not really working. It looks fakey, and the fact that it doesn't really line up where the visual plate is, maybe that's part of the problem. Maybe that you should just bring that board up so that it looks like it's lining up with that. That actually would help, because right now this is looking really big. So maybe just moving that up. And then, all of the wood members are the sizes, the wood member sizes for the cantilever pieces, the little supporting trusses, the shade structures, the exposed members, all of those are going to be really important. And maybe that's another way that you could help this this elevation, if you go to a shade structure or if you keep it a truss, is to study those wood member sizes, because if they're too small, it's not going to look right. And then I think the last of my comments is maybe, I don't know. I think in these interior court elevations where you've got the big, flat 3-story structure, basically you're trying to give it some. I appreciate the problem. I don't mean to be downgrading your abilities or anything like that. It's a tough problem to deal with. But I'm just thinking that maybe this belly board. So you've provided a way of breaking it up with color and different window arrangements and this roof arrangement, and then you cancel it out by putting this belly board straight across. So I think maybe doing something different with that belly board on this. Maybe it should be down here or something like that. Change it up, and the same thing on the. There's another elevation.
Probably the front of that one.
Yeah, the front. Right. Those are my comments.
Thanks, Kirk. Chris?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a few comments. If you can turn to the site plan. I'm looking at it actually shows a little bit better in the landscape plan, but basically the gist of it is there's a lot of the hardscape in front of the building along this north side seems to be very broken up. I mean, you have these detectable paver units, and they seem to be creating more of a problem than anything else. You end up with a lot of weird angles, and we're cutting that halfway into the stoop, and so I guess that'll lead to a question: is there any reason that everything on this side of the band can't be one type of paver, and everything on that side can be another?
This came up through the DART process with the building department, and what you see is a result of what they will accept as a minimum for the detectable warnings on the pedestrian path and turning in just on either side of each driveway or group of driveways. So it's something from a building department standpoint that we've tried to come up with other solutions, but this is what they've conditioned us at this point.
Okay. Well, it doesn't seem to be working the way I'm seeing it. I mean, I guess at a minimum, perhaps this line could extend a little further so it actually lines up with the edge of the stoop. And then, we have these sort of weird angles. Or I guess you could possibly extend the detectable pavers a little further, and so we don't end up with these little strips of, it's going to be a lot of cutting and a lot of expense in that. So anyway, I guess the comment would be to study that if possible to modify. And then we had talked last time about this fence that sort of protrudes out, and hopefully finding a way to soften that a bit.
Yeah, and you'll see that next review. So yeah, we are moving forward with planting those with vines. So it's all the metal tube rail.
Okay.
And then Courtney's going to provide a spec to plant it.
On the Taco Bell side?
Well, under it, or she's finding a way to just come up through it.
Okay. So then I guess when you come back, it might be nice, since we do have a lot of different paving, to bring samples. Right. And that's it. That's all I have.
Thanks, Chris. Paul? Okay. I think Kirk is pretty much right on with the comments that he made with respect to the changes that the stucco incorporation. And that's why I asked to see the previous approved plans, because I remember when we approved this, I had gone to a comfortable place with it, and I'm not there anymore. And and part of it has, you're, I think part of it is you're saying you're using this as an inspiration, and I can see how you're doing that, and I can respect that. However, I think the differences are in this facade, there's a balance between, and it has such a street presence and an entry presence, as opposed to me, this elevation speaks of a rear elevation of a building and not something worthy of a street frontage. And the reason that this one works, because they are similar sizes, but I think the reason this one works and this one doesn't is because of the sizes of the openings, like I said, and then this one with the shutters, and then this one has windows up in the gable as well. And just everything that Kirk said, just take that to heart, because that's, to me, why it's not working. And in fact, it really is not working with, in my opinion, putting the wood with the stucco and trying to make a stucco building, with the wood trim on the vertical trim. And so I think that's probably my biggest concern at this point. When you get into the courtyard elevations, because you had the horizontal wood siding, the belly boards didn't stand out and hit you in the face, and everything kind of blended in, and the wood siding made it look more traditional. For some reason, when you introduce stucco, it's losing that, and everything just becomes so much more massive. Paying attention to maybe how you could project windows or roofs over windows or balconies or things like that. It's just the massing, it just isn't working for me anymore. The massing that we approved, and project design approval. And I think that's really it for me. I agree with everything that everybody else said. So we're glad you came in for a progress review. Go ahead, Kirk.
It seems like there's a difference of opinion, of perhaps, and some members of the board feel like using wood trim and wood trimming elements with stucco is a mistake, and others don't feel that way.
Actually, I'm going to clarify what my comment is, that somebody made the comment that the vertical trim, trying to make the stucco building look like a wood building by adding the vertical trim. That's where I felt it wasn't successful. It's not that I felt necessarily that a belly board was not successful, but I don't see it in stucco. That's why I asked that question. And the windows in wood with the stucco building is entirely appropriate, in my opinion. With wood trim and the stucco building is fine. To me, it's just the way that you detailed the vertical corners isn't working for me. And if you were going to do a stucco band, to me, I didn't see how that was working in. So I think we're a little more on the same page than I made it sound.
Well, I know personally, I feel like the vertical, if it's a true corner, or even if it's not, if they're attempting to just provide some definition, to have some wood at the corners is okay to me. Vertical wood.
Then why don't we just let them come back with taking all of our concerns in and processing them. So, does anybody did anybody take notes? Does anybody want to?
You guys want to come back in 2 weeks, or okay? So this will be a 2-week continuance back to full board with the following comments. The board's generally supportive of the introduction of stucco material in the project. The applicants are to study the resulting detailing to make it more consistent to the different cladding materials. The board feels that where the two materials are used on the same virtual building, that change in color should occur. Board feels there still needs to be further study on the gable entry porches and their detailing. consider changing the roof forms and/or possible ways to get the structures to be supported from below. Board does not support the idea of using plaster horizontal bands. Study the layout of the detectable pavers, particularly alignments with adjacent conditions. Provide paving samples at the final review. Board feels that the use of the wood trim around the windows is encouraged, and consider the detailing of the sills to be consistent with that. Consider realigning some of the horizontal trims given the changes in the material.
Thanks, Keith. Do I have a second for the motion? Seconded by Kirk. Under discussion?
Madam Chair, can we add something about studying the member sizes that Kirk was talking about?
Study the sizes and proportions of the wood members to be consistent with the architectural style.
And I think we should carry forward the landscaping comments from the previous meeting, which are items number 3 and number 4, if that's okay with the maker of the motion. Okay. Any further discussion? Go ahead, Kirk.
There was a couple of, 1 or 2 items from the previous comments.
It was the gables that we talked about, the front entrances, alternatives to the roof, then the 2 landscaping comments, and then provide elevations without trees, which they're doing, and then return to full board. Those were them.
Yeah, just want to make sure those are the architecture comments.
Yeah, they were dealt with by Keith. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Okay, we're 3 minutes behind. And on to item number 3, 901 Olive Street.
Well, we just can't present that. Yep.
Good.
Tony, do we have minutes from the last meeting? Thank you. Okay, your name for the record.
Mark Kirkhardt from Design Arc Architects.
Melissa Sinerly from Design Arc Architects.
Philip Suding, Suding Design Landscape Architects.
All right, go ahead, Mark.
Okay. Rather than take you...
Oh, yeah. Press the center button. Yeah,
sorry.
there you go.
Rather than take you back through the whole process again, because I think most all of you have seen it at least one time, I thought what we would do is outline the changes that we have made and the height, how we've lowered it, and some of the other things that we've done as the project has gone through this process. And I'm going to then present the materiality for discussion, and I'd like to save a few minutes for Phil and also for the owner to speak. So in terms of what we've done, what we've accomplished in terms of our site planning issues from the first time you saw it, I just wanted to remind everyone that we have set the building back to address the needs of the Morton Bay fig tree that's on this corner. So we have actually submitted an arborist letter, and we revised the parking lot accordingly to provide the necessary clearances from that tree so we can retain that tree. We also revised the sidewalk along Olive Street, which you may remember from last time. Utilizing the pedestrian master plan, we recognized that we had plenty of width here in the right-of-way to construct a new sidewalk and pulling it away from the edge of the building in order to get an 18-inch landscaping strip in front of the building. and also to convert what are now just pockets for the individual trees into a continuous parkway. We added the landscaping that was required for the transformer. Sorry to take your out of your sale. And some additional plant material landscaping, which I'll let Phil talk about. And then we revised the entrance ramp. One of the benefits of moving that sidewalk out was it gave us an extra 18 inches to begin our sloping. And so this I'll get to more when I talk about how we were able to lower the podium. So we were able to move the ramp forward and put it at the maximum slope, which ties into what we did is we took the deck that was here, which was really driving the head height clearance to get the handicap access van into the parking lot. We actually took the deck from this location and moved it around to the side, and also installed an upturned beam and removed, there used to be patio doors there, they're now windows. I can show you that on the elevation. It's right here. So there was a matching deck here which had to have a downturned beam in order to cantilever the concrete decking. So by doing so, by moving the deck around to the side and making these into windows, we were able to do an upturned beam there, which allowed us to push the podium down. So as far as the height, that enabled us with the ramp length that we could get by that additional 18 inches and relocating that deck, we were able to lower the podium 6 inches. In addition to that, we lowered the upper finished floor of the mezzanine lofts and lowered the cowl height by a total of 3 feet. So it's apparent height from the sidewalk. The top of this cowl was lowered 3 feet, which we feel as far as particularly in terms of the pedestrian experience along the street, which is really the only place where you can see that. The apparent height of the building was lowered 3 feet by removing that cowl. We also just, since you've seen it last time, we removed the cowl from this end piece. It's on the north, kind of the north corner here, to kind of simplify that and also give us more clearance for the tree. And if you may recall that in our earliest scheme, this unit here was also had the mezzanine with the spiral stair, so we eliminated that and made this simply just a studio. So that also eliminated the mass along the north side there and gave us more room for the tree.
You still have building behind the tree, though, right?
Beyond that,
right.
Yes. But in terms of the front unit that faces the street, which is depressed way back, we don't have a mezzanine on that any longer. We also reduced the pitch of the roofs over the top of those mezzanines and lowered the plate height of the mezzanine front right here to 7'6". So from the inside, it's a 7'6" plate height where the roof springs from, and it's a very flat pitch. And I believe you recall, we're pretty adamant about the fact that most all of this is pretty much disguised behind the tree cover. We also, the cowl used to extend a total of 4 feet out the last time you saw it. We've actually pushed that back, and we have it now only out 3 feet, 3 feet in front of the face of the building. So that is an effort to push it back even more from the pedestrian. Then we made the revisions that we can kind of review to the office building. Per the comments, earlier comments of the board, if you recall, we moved the roof screen back all the way around and added this plaster element to kind of extrude the lobby up, which I think everyone here on this board was pretty happy with. We did get the parking modification approved at Show 10 days ago in about an hour. So I think that's kind of the main items. I want to bring out one additional, actually this exhibit, before I move on to the color materials. There's been a lot of rumblings around about the height of the building being 51 feet tall, and I think it's really kind of not exactly, even though that is precisely the height, but utilizing the way the city calculates that, which is by basically taking the ground plane and moving that up. It's really not giving us much benefit for having the big existing hole that's in the ground. So we prepared an exhibit to show the relative heights of the building to the adjacent grades. So here, this is along Olive Street, so along the sidewalk.
Without the trees.
Pardon me?
Without the trees.
Without the trees. These are the apparent grades or elevations of the height of the cowl from the sidewalk there. So as you can see, it's 30 feet at this end, and it's actually 28 foot 1 at this end if you projected that line out to the sidewalk. So, you know, because this is a 17.5 foot hole in the ground right here, so the appearance of the building to the sidewalk is what's shown here, and we even went ahead and projected the height back at the line of that mezzanine, you know, which is back
30
another.
feet.
How many?
30 feet. 27 and a half.
27 and a half feet back. So that's, I think, a much, even though we are utilizing the actual height of 51 feet being the maximum, just for your information, that location, where that height is, where that plane intersects our building, excuse me, I'm going to go to the roof plan here. Is right at this elevator overrun. That's the first piece of the building that actually pops through the 51-foot height limit. If you follow what I'm saying. So when you take the existing grade of the building and move it up three-dimensionally, that's the first place. That's the highest point. Other than that, it's a lot lower than that. So I'm going to leave these. The other one, did have a neighbor come to the show hearing of our neighbor here to the north, and there was a little bit of confusion as to which side of the building, which elevation of the building he was concerned that maybe all of the apartments were looking out on his property, which is not the case. So we took the north elevation and projected those same heights from the height of his driveway, because there's a bank from the driveway down to the building, but if you're driving along on the driveway, the apparent heights of these elevations are as shown. So the closest part of it is like 28 feet high. You know, it's running in the 28 to 30 foot range when you take the elevations from this driveway, even though we know that's not the way the city calculates it, but I still feel that it's important. In terms of the materiality, people wanted to see examples of the perforated metal, and so we actually got a sample and painted it. We would be proposing to use this perf metal in a Kynar painted finish, factory applied finish, something like this color. This was a color of spray paint we were able to get, but it's a brown, rustic kind of brown. And we put a photo here, an example of what perforated metal looks like when used in an architectural environment. What's good about this photo is that it actually shows corrugated metal that is non-perforated along with the same corrugated metal that is perforated, so you can kind of see which is what we're proposing to do on our project. In limited areas, we actually have some of the corrugated metal on the building and some of it used in the sunshade, which is kind of, as you can see, when it really becomes kind of a scrim. And I think it's interesting to look at it and to hold it up to see that you can actually still see through windows, but it still provides percentage of shade. And this is also completely designable for the quantities that we have. We can vary the size of the holes, the amount of open, so we can use one where we want to ventilate for the garage and another for sun shading. You can also space the holes on a square pattern, square grid, as opposed to offsetting them, and so forth. But something along this line is what we're proposing. And these are also the colors. We're leaving you a color board with the actual colors identified, but it is a very warm palette that relates to the preponderance of brick buildings on the surrounding areas. With that, I'll turn it over to, unless you want to have any other questions?
Not yet.
I'll turn it over to Phil, and then Peter would like to close.
Okay, can we turn it to the description?
Okay, so the comments that were made last time were to provide more screening for the proposed transformer. The proposed transformers here, what we did is we just carried the larger shrubs that we have across that opening, and then of course the transformer is shielded by the building on all other sides, all other three sides. Then the last comment that was made with respect to the landscaping was to provide a spineless or a unarmed plant at the sidewalk that wouldn't, I guess, catch your ankles. So I looked at the Agave desmontii Desmentiana, and it is actually considered unarmed by San Marcos growers. They list it as unarmed, but just in case, I added another aloe, which is the aloe Delta lights, and I'm sorry I forgot to bring a photograph of that, but it's an aloe, a small aloe. All of the rest of the landscape remains the same. As you know, we're able to use some of the existing palm trees, which I think is a really good thing. Give the project some scale.
Thanks, Phil.
I think my team's done a really good job at responding to the overall concerns that the commission has had regarding height. And I think Mark made a good point about you got to keep it in context to the whole that exists there now. And the formula whereby these heights are calculated can be a little bit misleading, and I think it is in this case. And the natural grade of that site prior to the excavation of that giant parking lot actually makes most of my corner building that we're not touching, most of that structure is the terrain comes all the way down, so there's very little two-story element. There's only at the very end is it possibly to be two-story because of the natural terrain that goes all the way up to that first story on by the corner of Olive and Cannon Perdido. So, I mean, if you did a cross-section, you'd really realize how much land had been excavated to make that pit, and it's very instructive relative to that diagrams, both diagrams or drawings that Mark shows the height to our neighbors to the north and our height relative to the building to Olive Street, which is really the critical one that people see. So I think that's important to try to keep in context. And the other thing I want to emphasize is that the module for these units, as a developer, so often we design from the inside out. And then when we come to you guys, we spend a lot of time on the outside looking at the details and the impacts of the elevations. So the module of this was designed from a very successful project I did down in Carpinteria, which is the Palm Lofts. And the reason it's so successful is that it has, they're small, but they have great volume. They have really good natural light to live in. And I have very little turnover in these units. People love them. And I did a recent study with the tenants relative to designing this project because I knew I wanted to use something in that vein. And it was very interesting in the study. The first two reasons that the tenants stated that they liked the project the most was natural light and the volume of the spaces. So from a tenant perspective, these units really take advantage of the environmental qualities of living in a space where you have light at either end of your unit. Even if it's only 800 and some odd square feet, you got light at one end and you got light at another end, and the ceiling is not compressing you. And you got this great natural cross ventilation, and you can live in these dense quarters and feel like you're still enjoying the beauty of Santa Barbara. So that's really the context of how we ended up with this courtyard, how we ended up with the setbacks that we have. And most of the design was driven with that environmental context. And I appreciate what design that we've been able to address. And I think the general plan update does a really good job of asking the ABR to make sure that projects encourage an environmentally sensitive design. And we've got great natural light, great energy efficiency. The thing's probably going to be energy neutral with the solar panels we're going to be able to put on this roof structure and on the existing building that needs so much attention and love. With that being said, I hope that helps understand how the genesis of this design.
Thanks, Peter.
The last thing I would just say is there's been some rumblings around about how unfortunate it is that we have this existing modern building on the corner. Some people don't really like it, suggest that it's not a good building. Well, the reality is, it's a building that is there, and, our owner happens to like it. It's an existing building. Our project is an addition to that existing building, and so we feel that this modern approach to the design is appropriate to not only the neighborhood, but to the adjacent building that is part of the project. And as I think in one of our first meeting, we pointed out with a total map, which we can show you, there's a preponderance of mid-century modern buildings in this block, and flat roof buildings that have been built since the mid-century. So if there is an area in Santa Barbara that has a preponderance of modern buildings, it is this block. So that's why we feel it's appropriate.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, we have, I have 2 speaker slips. If anybody else wants to speak, I need a speaker slip. Mary Louise Days, followed by Grant Castleberg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to compliment the ABR for your work on this project previously with respect to the height and bulk. My name is Mary Louise Days. I'm a city resident, and I'm have a history of knowledge in local architecture. I'd like to point out that this site is near 2 city landmarks, Santa Barbara High School and the Gonzales Ramirez Adobe on Laguna Street. It is also 3/4 of a block from El Pueblo Viejo, which, of course, as you are well aware, requires Spanish and Californian and Santa Barbara types of architecture. I think that this project really has a problem with neighborhood compatibility. It is across the street from an intensely residential, a very handsome residential area, which initially was single-family residences. This site is C2 zoning, which that dates way back, and that's how we have other commercial, or especially office buildings in the region. In my opinion, it's unfortunate that this project chooses to model itself partly after the homely corner building, which I guess is a result of the context of its times and may even have been designed by the state. I entreat you to please follow your own policies, your own required policies as seen in the city charter and in your own documents. The city charter charges you to protect and preserve the natural charm and beauty of Santa Barbara, including the historical style, qualities, characteristics, and architectural features and structures associated and established with by its long established, illustrious and distinguished past. Your guidelines mention Santa Barbara's distinctive architecture, its regional type of Mediterranean architectural influence. It states, it is paramount that property owners, architects, and builders use initiative and their best judgment and talents toward development of buildings of character that harmonize with their surroundings and are suitable for proposed sites. Again, there's mention of distinctive architecture should present a harmonious character, to not clash or exhibit discord with the particular surrounding area in which they are placed. Structure elements should be consistent with the best elements that distinguish the area in which they are proposed. I and a number of other people feel that this project does not do that. Factors such as the area's prevailing architectural styles, compatibility, structure visibility are factors which should be considered. One of the ABR's stated goals is to encourage the preservation of pre-1925 and Hispanic styles of architecture. In addition, traditional architectural styles based on the city's Hispanic tradition are preferred at locations that are highly visible to the public, such as gateways or entry points. And I present that this is quite an important intersection. It seems that the project could be designed in such a way as to not conflict so clearly, especially with metal siding, conflicting with the neighborhood. Now, Kellum DeForest, who has presented statements to you in the past is unable to be here today. But there are, as I said, a number of other people concerned with this. I believe at least one letter was presented to the staff, which could be read. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary Louise. Grant Castleberg.
Don Cherry, members of the ABR. I echo Mary Louise's statements. And my wife and I own the property on the next corner on Carrillo and Olive, an old craftsman-style house that we've had since 1976. And I feel that this project, the design of it, is totally out of keeping with the neighborhood, with what's around there. And I think that, especially the metal siding, I see that it looks industrial. And I think it would be very easy to have pushed the existing rather poorly designed state building on the corner towards a more Mediterranean type of architecture and follow suit with the additional condominiums. And I entreat you to consider that. Thank you.
Thanks, Grant. All right. Questions from the board?
Excuse me, Madam Chair.
Oh, go ahead.
We have two public comment
Oh, I'm sorry.
letters that
You know
we
what, I
should
did
acknowledge.
Yeah, I forgot to mention, there was a letter from Don Sharp to the members of the board. Did everybody get a copy of this and read it? His letter is interesting because he's saying a lot of the things that Mary Louise was saying about reminding us of our jobs as ABR members, and how, and I'll just sum up what he said for those of you who didn't read it. It's he's basically stating that we're ignoring a couple particular goals within our own guidelines. One of them being the goal to promote neighborhood compatibility. He says has been totally ignored by placing a very contemporary designed overbearing structure into a charming, primarily single-story residential neighborhood. To ignore this fact and mimic the project after a very mediocre building not belonging in Santa Barbara, in my opinion. So that's his first charge, that he says we're ignoring whatever it says, ignoring the goal. The second goal is goal H, a violation, to encourage the preservation of pre-1925 and Hispanic styles of architecture. These residential units in no way promote the most important tenet of the ABR goals, and is nestled amongst two very important landmark structures in EPV district. As a board, do you really care about your charge in Santa Barbara? Do you not read and follow these established ABR goals? What's the other one?
Okay, I just had one handed to me by Monique Mansfield, a letter in support of the project. I'll just read it. It's short enough I can quickly read it. She says, I live at 1032 Olive Street and am writing to you in support of the project design at 901 Olive Street. I have had the opportunity to review the design with Melissa Sinarli of Design Arc to understand all of the components of the project, and am pleased as a neighbor in the R3 zone that the project is in keeping with the neighborhood, even though it is in the commercial zone. The office building on the corner of Olive and Cannon Perdido and the vast open parking area has been underdeveloped for years. Knowing this project will keep the original vision of the contemporary office building and incorporate a much-needed residential component while using best management practices is the type of project that should be supported in this neighborhood. The development will enhance the appearance of the office building, preserve the Morton Bay fig and olive trees, and add relief from the street even though it is not required, while providing an adequate amount of parking that will no longer appear as a chasm of asphalt. The mixed-use nature of office and residential is much needed in this downtown neighborhood, and the design on this block is in keeping with the neighborhood buildings. Please approve this project as designed so the neighborhood can benefit from it for years to come. And that's from Monique Mansfield.
Thanks, Tony. Okay, questions from the board. Chris, do you want to start?
I just have a few questions. Is there anywhere in these plans that designate the edge of the EPV district in relation to the site?
No. It's
Does anybody know on your team where it starts? Starts at Laguna. So it starts,
On the west side.
here we are, and it starts,
Laguna is down here, so
Goodness.
it's on the west side of Laguna.
it starts on the next
side
block
only.
over.
The west side only, so you cross the street of Laguna going east, that's not in APV.
Okay. And we know it's not an EPV, or we wouldn't be here today.
Right.
Okay.
But it's just interesting that it's on one block basis.
Okay.
Opposed to both blocks.
I get it.
And that's, I guess, a critical point with respect to our project as well.
And the only other question I had was regarding the street trees along Olive. It looks like there's one missing. Is it necessary to replace? Because there's a gap there that might help to.
I believe if there is one missing, that we will add one, but I thought they were pretty, yeah, maybe it is one in between the last two, which Can Perdido. Good
Happy to
catch.
add
Yeah, yeah, I don't think that's a problem, as long as it's okay with the urban forest superintendent.
That's all I have for questions.
Okay, Kirk? Questions? Yeah, Gary.
One minor question. You mentioned that there was going to be different size, or there potentially will be different size holes for the perforated. Is that going to be something that is going to be on the front? Where exactly would where would that occur?
When we come back from final, we would have samples and exactly what we're proposing, but I just mentioned that so that, because we may want to have a variety so that we could make sure, because we're using that also to screen the garage, the parking garages. So we'll need to do calculations in terms of the air exchange, because we want to be able to have those be naturally ventilated instead of mechanically ventilated. So it may be that those would have larger holes with a higher percentage of opening than what we would use when we were using them to screen the sun. So there might be two different patterns, one tighter for the shading and one a little bit more open for ventilation. But we would have that documented in the final.
Okay, that was the only question.
Paul?
No questions.
Keith?
Mark, is that the actual profile you guys are
Yes.
looking at?
Yes.
And you kind of enumerated the various moves that you've made to reduce the structure's height. Do you have kind of a grand total, what the delta is that you've reduced it?
Section is 401.
401 or 401.
Starting from
Just kind of where we started,
Excuse me.
where we ended up at the current spot as far as how much it's come down.
The one- This one here. So, you see your little cheat sheet? So, starting at the top, we lowered the plate height of the little loft by 6 inches to get it down. It's now 7.6. It was 8 feet. We also lowered the slope so that this height would not get above where it had been on the previous, even though we lowered it by making it longer. Then we lowered the ceiling height here to 9 feet, and that allowed
And that was what?
like 11. But we lowered that, but we also brought the cowl down to that height as well. So that makes this I think a total of 3 feet from where it was before, this cowl location. And then we lowered this entire podium level by 6 inches more, and we can still accommodate we can use like a dustpan ramp for the ADA to get back up to the finished floor of the building, the existing office building, so that lowered another 6 inches. That necessitated us relocating this deck that was here and the downturn beam in order to get the height limit, and also by adding the extra 18 inches of ramp length that's how we were able to get that down, an additional 6 inches.
We also took 6 inches out of the first story, 11.6 to 11.
Yeah, from where we were
Here?
before, this was 11.6, and we took it down to 11. Yeah, so I think if you looked at the overall height, it's like 3.5 feet, 4 feet from this point, but this is the most visible sign by lowering that, which is really what is the apparent height of the building.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Stephanie?
I just have a question about the roof on the top. That's metal roofing?
Yes.
Metal roofing? Okay.
Yes.
That's it.
Who didn't get to ask questions over here? Gary? Oh, who? Oh, Kirk.
On the corrugated scrim, is there options in terms of the depth of the corrugation as well as the
Yes.
full size? There is, okay.
Yeah. We were proposing that, I don't know where that sample went that we had here. Yeah, you can make that many different proportions, pretty much unlimited. We were just looking for enough depth so that it would have the structural integrity to be able to span the longer distances.
Oh.
So we could make it slightly tighter.
Okay.
It just seemed reasonable. It's about 1.5 inches depth.
Okay. Those are my only questions. Thanks.
I just had one, and that is, this is 11 feet.
On that level.
Could this be lowered?
That was basically, as Peter mentioned, we're designing those from the inside out, and because of the width of the spaces and the depth of them, we want to keep, we'd like to keep that height because that's what makes those units livable.
Can we go to the floor plan just real quick? I just want to look at that again. Floor plans. Yeah.
So that's these units. on
These
this level,
units.
on both levels. And those are 800 and some square feet, so they're
I think 875.
just slightly less than 20 by 40.
All right. Okay. Comments? Stephanie, do you want to start?
I really like the project, and I commend you for the changes that you've made to reduce the height of the building, and I think it makes a big difference. I tend to agree that the neighborhood is kind of in transition, and there's a lot of instances of modern buildings as well as historical buildings in this neighborhood. And I think it's fits well with the neighborhood, and I'm in support of the project.
Thanks, Stephanie. Keith?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Yeah, I think a number of the moves that you made, the reducing the height and changing some of the massing along the olive were all positive. I still think you probably shade the height a little bit, and again, I'm more concerned about the relationship on Olive Street to the neighbors on the opposite side of the street. I realize you're trying to get this volume because of the smaller size of the units, but I think another foot would still be workable, at least on that main level. Regarding the metal, I think there still needs to be further investigation on that. I think the profile in particular might be kind of too coarse a grain, particularly along the pedestrian sidewalk on the corner there. This block does have a mixture of buildings that are not only kind of the 50s modern, but then the kind of big blank brick box next door and the other brick buildings on the block. So I think there are a number of different directions that it could go, and it would still be compatible with the neighborhood. I think the key in my mind is just the massing and scale, I think you have the level of detail that makes it compatible. I still feel that the height could come down, again, in deference to the Olive Street neighbors. But I think it's heading in the right direction. And again, I think the metal needs to be studied further.
Thanks, Keith. Paul?
I'm going to divide my comments into two parts. Sheet. I'm going to. There's so much of this building that I like. I truly like the form and the mental exercise that you went in to create this building. It's phenomenal, and it works, and I like the forms. It's amazing that this works. What doesn't work in my mind is the building material, which is the metal. And I go to this elevation, and I point out to the other board members that if this was, let's just say, 1970s, and this was vertical redwood, and this was horizontal, whatever, then we'd have a certain look. But now it's 2012, and this is going to be metal siding, and this is going to be...
That's not metal siding. That's board and batten.
I don't know. It's M1.
I think that's pointing to the deck. The deck.
The deck is perforated metal.
Yeah,
All
this
right.
is the wood. This is
so
the
this
metal.
is Hardy board?
Yes, sir.
Good.
All the red stuff here.
All right.
If you'd like, we can take you back and show you where that all is.
No.
It's only used in very many.
This part, so go back to the form here, the way this massing all works. This part I've never liked, and you've done some minor tweaks to it. I still don't like it. The horizontal,
It says M1.
whatever. It says M1?
It says M1. All these say M1.
And what is that?
M1 is painted corrugated metal siding. That's why.
That's MT1.
M1 right here. This leader going to there. And here. M1.
M1 is fiber cement board. MT1 is the metal. Is metal.
Oh,
M1 is
Oh,
fiber
okay,
cement.
okay.
Thank you.
It'd help if we knew how to read plans, huh?
But still, the thing about it is the form. I like the form. Just the metal, perforated metal thing. From my perspective of being on this board and protecting how architecturally we changed over time, it's too fast of a iteration or a change, and I have a difficulty of seeing how this is going to fit in our town. And it has to do with the metal material that's cladding the building. It has nothing to do with the form or the size. Great that you got the parking approved. But that's how I won't support this project is because of the perforated metal, and has nothing to do about it being 4 stories and all the other kinds of things. Because the form and the architectural articulation that's happening here is amazing. That's great. It's that one building material that I can't support.
All right. Paul, Gary.
This is I agree that this is an eclectic neighborhood, but it is between, we're on Coda Street, we have the Italian neighborhood, and there's some sandstone, and we try to all of our new buildings, we try to have a little bit of that architecture. When we had that done with the transition house and the artisan court, we tried to take a little bit of our analysis for that. This one is not far from Pueblo Viejo, and it's across the street from Craftsman Home. Now, there are some examples of modern architecture that's true. The existing building is, and there's the print shop down the street that has pink brick and kind of the 60s modern. And there is some eclectic buildings there. But I am a little bit more on the side of the public on this, where I think that we're stepping too far into what I would call a modernist building on this one. And although I feel that the architecture proposed here is good, I think it needs a little more work. I think you can still keep it in the modernist style. I don't think that it has to be a Spanish-style building or Mediterranean-style building at all. I think that because of the existing building that's there, it could be in the style that they're proposing. But I think the amount of the size of the structure, especially on the parking lot side, and from the street, and the amount of metal that is used on this and the amount of perforated metal that is used on it, I think it's a little too much in your face and not very much Santa Barbara. I still think that you can design, and I think the example that we saw today from the Santa Barbara Bowl, I still think that you can design with new design, new concept ideas, new materialities, metals, and so forth, and still have a little bit of Santa Barbara architecture or Santa Barbara style in it as well. And I don't think that this building has that. I don't think that this building has something that the character of our town has. And our charge here on the Architectural Board of Review is to keep it within a Santa Barbara architecture. And this really isn't. This is more Palm Springs, and this is more Los Angeles. This is a little bit too of the international style. And it's not incorporating local materials. And I think that a building of this size and a project of this structure has to have some more of a local attachment to it with local materials. And I would like to see something to that nature, still incorporating your basic designs and layouts, but I don't think that that what's proposed here with the perforated steel and some of the corrugated steel and the amount of it is acceptable for this project. So I'm just going to say that as far as materiality goes on this, I am not in favor of the project.
Okay, Carrie. Kirk?
I think I share some of those sentiments. I basically think that the metal siding is used in excess, and that it could be reduced quite a bit and still be a very successful project. And I'm also concerned now that we're seeing it, that whether it's really actually going to work as a roof screen for the equipment. It looks to me like you're, depending on the angle that you're at, you're going to be able to see the equipment through it. So
It's not.
yeah.
That's not perforated. Yeah.
Oh, that's not
Some of
perforated.
them are
Oh, right.
solid.
Okay, yeah.
Not all of them are perforated.
Yeah. Yeah.
MT2.
So those are my only comments.
All right, Kirk. Chris?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm a bit torn myself. I'm a big fan of the modern architecture, and we've run into this problem before. It's just an unfortunate location where we're trying to install this sort of architecture, and being so close to a predominantly sort of Spanish neighborhood. If you go up Olive, and although there is sort of there are buildings surrounding this that it placates to in terms of the style. So, as I said, I'm a little bit torn. In terms of the landscaping, I think that could actually help with that transition. And I think maybe if it had a little bit more of a residential feel to it, and not the one plant per bed scenario, then I think that it can help to sort of soften that and help transition out of that residential zone. Beyond that, I think an additional street tree could go in place on that along Olive Street. And I do applaud the expanded parkway, and that's a huge plus for that area along Olive as well. And I think that's about it.
Thanks, Chris. All right. We've got some feedback in the room. I don't know where it's coming from, but if you turn yours off, yeah.
Did I interject one thing? Or
I haven't made my comments yet.
Sorry.
Okay, what are my comments? Really brief. I still very much like this project. I've always loved this building. In fact, when I moved here 25 years ago, this particular part of this building, I know Don Sharp totally disagrees with me. I think I've just always really liked this building. So I admire... Exactly. And I admire the owner and the architects for preserving the existing building, and what I've always considered a good example of mid-century modern architecture. And I think it's going to be even better than it was. I'm still, I'm happy with the reduction in the height. I really, and I think that was successful and helps a lot. I'm still not convinced that you need is it 12 feet that you're still asking for in those? 11. You might, like Keith said, you might be able to squeeze a little bit and still not sacrifice. I don't remember what the ceiling height is in this room, but it looks like 10. And I'm thinking in a residential building, this could feel really good to me, and still get a transom window and still get light above the French door or or whatever you're using. Steel sliding doors or whatever it is you're using. I still think you could get an additional transom or ribbon window across that you're needing for your height. So I would look to you guys to study that and see if there's any way you could reduce that. I'm torn as well on the metal because as a material I like it. In this particular application, I've always been concerned, especially with the amount of massing that, even though I like this as an architectural piece, I'm not so sure it's appropriate for this exact location, and I'm just not convinced of the material right now and how it's going to fit in. And maybe somebody else mentioned, and maybe I feel this way too, maybe it's the amount of it, or the fact that it is 3 or 4 feet out beyond the face of the existing building, or there's something about it that's not quite working for me yet. So those are my few comments. And Mark, did you want to say something?
Well, I'd just like to say that I appreciate the positive comments, and it's a lot of people on the board actually recognize that it is a modernist building that we don't have to turn our backs on because it's Santa Barbara. I would hate to have the project, not approved because of the corrugated metal. We're willing to give up the corrugated metal. We'll completely punt on that. I would like to, suggest that if we could, we'd like to get an approval so we could move ahead with conditions, and you could condition it that no corrugated metal, and we'll come back with something completely different. If it's possible, because we have looked at wood slat ideas and other kinds of things that have kind of the same function, other different kinds of louvers, or removing it entirely, to tell you the truth. I don't want that to be, we think it's a really great solution. It's a modern solution. It's something that's, if you open up any journals, you'll see it being used a lot all over the world as a successful scrim. But I don't want to have that be the one thing. I mean, if we could just take that off and that's the same thing with the metal siding on the building. We were using that to integrate the material so that it wouldn't just be perforated metal. There would be other kinds of metal in other places, but it's not a necessity. We can come back with a completely different solution, and we'd be happy to do that. We don't want the perforated metal to be the bomb on the building.
Okay.
If you're going to like it,
okay,
we'll get rid of it.
Let's see what everybody thinks about it, and how they feel about it, the project, moving on with project design approval without seeing the alternative. So. Does anybody want to?
You need a motion or a discussion?
We need a motion.
Madam Chair,
A motion and then discussion.
I was going to say, I for one would want to see the proposed alternative before we give a project design approval, and I don't know if some sort of continuance or come back in 2 weeks sort of thing, what the board feels about that, but I'd like to see the proposed direction before we I'm comfortable personally giving it the project design.
I feel the same way, unfortunately, Mark.
I'll make a motion for a 2-week continuance for the applicant to bring back just the elevations of the project with removing the metal siding and the corrugated metal, and incorporating different design ideas for the material for the building. And I'll also add some positive comments about the dynamic building, the proportions, and the scale appropriate for the neighborhood. The great care that was put into minimizing the height of the structure and taking into account the preserving of the existing tree, as well as recognizing the existing trees along Olive.
Do I have a seconder for the motion?
Second that.
Seconded by Stephanie. Under discussion?
As I say, maker of the motion, seconder, if you consider adding that some board members feel there's still an opportunity to reduce, further reduction in height.
That sounds good.
Further discussion? Gary, did you have anything to add?
Just a general discussion. Looking at the building materials, this was a perforated metal. It seems like some metal is okay in some locations. People were talking about the amount of metal. So all metal doesn't have to go away, but we really don't want to tell you what to take away and what to do. But some will be appropriate.
Kirk?
Madam Chair, this is maybe sort of off the wall, and we haven't really talked about it, but in terms of compatibility, I think that's going to make a huge difference to either remove entirely or reduce greatly the amount of metal. But I'm also wondering if, in terms of compatibility, that maybe some of the board and bat areas could be changed to plaster as well, just to keep it more in what's happening with the...
Okay, that's a good comment. I don't think it necessarily needs to make its way into the motion, but I think that applicants are hearing you on that one. I think that was a good comment, actually. Any more further discussion?
Just briefly, just so we're clear, it's not the elimination of the metal, but the possibility of a reduction. So we're on the same
It doesn't
page.
necessarily mean it has to be the complete elimination.
Right.
And Paul made that clear.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Ready? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. You're welcome. Thank you for yours. Okay, we're behind now, thanks to Mark Kirkard and his team. Just kidding. On to item 4, 528 Anacapa Street.
I do. It sounds like we're going to come back, so I don't know if you still want to keep it, but you can.
Oh, do I need to step down from this one? Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry. My name's Ted Meter, architect for the project. I'm here with Todd Stewart and Julia Mayer, the tenants.
Okay.
This is a tenant improvement project at 528 Anacapa.
Can I get the minutes first before you continue, just so we are on the same page? It says here, action may be taken if sufficient information is presented. If you don't mind, I'll briefly go through the minutes. Overall proposed design concept is acceptable with the following changes. Locate the trash enclosure away from the sidewalk. Provide more landscaping adjacent to the patio and or elsewhere on the site. Study reducing the width of the curb cut off of Anacapa Street in order to add more landscaping. 2, verify all that proposed patio improvements around the existing tree will not jeopardize the tree. 3, show compliance with the stormwater management program to integrate into landscaping. All right.
Okay. We've come back with a reduced outdoor patio. I'll describe the building first, even though there weren't any comments last time about the actual building. That is part of the project. Here is the new glazing, new architectural metal canopy.
Actually flat for the TV guy.
This, what we want to mention is that this is a tenant improvement project, and we're leaseholders here, and the agreement to use the property doesn't really allow us to make site improvements all to the far extent of the parking lot. We have a signed lease agreement that takes out 3 parking spaces, and that's kind of the perimeter boundary of what we're trying to make all these improvements within. So we have added landscaping on all sides of the patio, but we're not able to make a curb cut change in the scope of this. I mean, this coffee shop can open without these improvements, and it might have to, but we're certainly not capable of including that in the scope of work as far as traffic studies, curb cuts, sidewalk changes, things like that. We have moved the trash enclosure away from Anacapa Street to the far side of the building. I'll just switch to A2 here. Used to be here, now this is all landscaping, and it's on the far side of the building behind a fence. on a new concrete pad.
Existing fence, and how tall is that fence?
6-foot-high wood fence. Existing, I've been told by planning it should be called as-built because it's not on any plans.
Okay.
But whether that needs to be a new 6-foot-high wood cedar fence or an as-built 6-foot-high wood cedar fence, we're not really sure. But it will have an accessible gate, an accessible trash enclosure connected to the accessible walkway, and it will be washable slope to drain per health code requirements, and it's completely out of sight. So this has now been given back to landscaping. The patio used to extend all the way to the corner of the existing accessible walkway here in our previous scheme, and we were wrapping it around an existing magnolia tree with a tree grate, integrating it into the patio. We're backing off of that idea. We've pulled it back to the location of where there's already an existing site wall right here behind the tree. So we're not actually bringing any site wall closer. We're going to tear it out and replace it. But as far as encroaching on the tree's space here, we're not. This wall is in an existing location. We're just replacing it with a better looking one.
Okay.
Now we have additional landscaping here that was not here last time. And finally, this we've provided an 18-inch strip.
Here it is.
I can see it here. Of landscape, even though this isn't on the street front, this is the drive aisle of the parking lot. It's going to be visible from all angles as you come down the street, and it helps to break up between the accessible ramp and the board-formed concrete wall here.
Okay.
So we'll put a little texture in front of that. You can also see in this graphic that we're going to have to turn this entire 312 square feet into permeable concrete paving. That's just. It's concrete of the exact same color with no fines, rolled smooth with 25% void. And it will keep us away from the Tier 3 requirements by making this entire area. So we're under 500 square feet of replaced concrete in that scheme. All of the concrete, because we're matching existing apron around the building, it's just going to be white broom, light broom finish. No color, no texture. But this is kind of far down on Anacapa. It's across the street from the car wash and Max Grocery. And while we definitely responded to all the comments about adding the landscaping back in, it's still a step above kind of what's immediately around it. And these pictures just kind of illustrate what we're doing to the building. We're tearing off, which is a very flimsy metal canopy with comp shingles glued onto it and replacing it with essentially the same 5-foot projection, just in a completely different material and execution. Adding clear story windows above and then putting some panel to patch up the scar at the top of the building. The rest of the brick is completely existing. All the openings are existing and the glazing is just being replaced and beautified. But again, there's not really anything structural happening to the building.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll open up public comment. Is there anyone from the public wishing to speak on this project? Seeing nobody, I'll close public comment and bring it back to the board for questions of the applicant. Anybody can jump
Are
in.
you painting the building? The entire building?
Yes, we're painting the entire building.
Okay.
Warm off-white. It's not submitted here.
Anybody else? I have two questions. Do you have a picture of the as-built fence? Not that it matters, but at some point we'll need some kind of picture of it. No problem.
I previously submitted it.
And then is this a poured concrete wall with, is this the board form? Or
Yeah.
do you have a detail of this right now or later in life?
I can provide it later. This is pretty well
It's a
rendered
vertical.
here. I mean,
Yeah, okay.
I can't imagine it looking
just like that.
Even that good, actually. But yeah, vertical is what we've settled on.
That's fine.
And it's it's semi.
You're doing fine.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
My turn.
Quick question. Are there handrail extensions required for your steps there?
We only have 2 risers, so my interpretation is no.
Okay, I think you'll need to verify that because I think that's not the case.
We
Just
will
turn the corner.
We will certainly do it.
Anyway, check that out.
Yeah.
Make sure you're squared away there.
Chris.
I'm just wondering what the situation is with the apron, and I guess I'll just come right to the question. Is there any way to turn this into a 24-inch planter?
This line's not moving.
This line cannot
the dining area could be reduced if that's
okay.
required
And then
passage.
what about this? What are the odds of continuing that planter around in that area? Or is that messing with your parking?
I just thought it wasn't very much bang for the buck. It's completely interior view at that point. You have to be on the lot to see that.
Right.
So.
Okay. That's it for questions.
Okay. Go into comments. Anybody jump in?
I'll jump in. I think the applicants responded well to the previous comments, and it looks like a nice upgrade of the existing structure in my mind, so I think it's ready for project design approval, get into the details.
Anything different from board members?
Yeah, a couple of comments. I'm wondering about the board wall. Given that there is no concrete, exposed concrete like that on the building, there's nothing like that in the neighborhood. Maybe it should be something more in keeping with other more traditional material types. And then I also mentioned this last time, but given my experience on TIs is that the building department will still require the parking to meet the minimum ADA code requirements in terms of handicap parking and also landscape planters in the parking lot. But I guess you'll get that later.
All right. With that, any other comments?
I think it's a good move to remove the mansard roof, and I think it'll be an interesting addition to that corner. And the permeable paving, I have all positive comments. So it's
Can
ready
you
to
roll
roll.
that into a motion?
No.
Can I make one additional comment? It's at the discretion of the applicant, but I think continuing that planter around the east side, I think would just help to create some separation from the parking lot.
You're talking right over here at this side?
Yeah, it's not a deal breaker, and if it's a problem with the parking arrangement, it's just from an aesthetic point of view, from a consumer walking up to this new place. I think it would just help to soften a little bit more.
Okay. So add that to the motion. Does someone want to formulate a motion? And look at you.
I'll give it a shot. So this would be for project design approval, returning to consent for final. With the following comments, applicants to return with photographs of the as-built wood fence trash enclosure for approval. Applicants to verify building and planning requirements for the handrail extensions at these proposed steps, and that the parking layout conforms to building and planning requirements for ADA and landscaping. Applicants strongly encouraged to add some additional planting on the east side of the new patio. That's it.
Okay. Does someone want to second that?
Second.
Okay. Any other discussions? I had a couple other little tiny things. If the applicant can include a detail of the site wall, just so it's in there showing the overall height and how it's being formed. And if the applicant can show on the irrigation plans the irrigation backflow device and how it's being screened. And then the last item was the applicant said that they were going to paint the entire building, so I had that noted on the plans, and then provide a color board for the city records.
To include a planting and irrigation plan with details.
Are you familiar with what's required for commercial projects for final?
Actually, the way I read it, commercial requires a landscape architect. Is there a way out of that?
No.
Okay.
So a landscape architect will know that you need the planting irrigation plan and the water control and that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Anything else? I'll call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Oops, I'm sorry.
The last item. So where is my, somebody took my other agenda. We only have one left. Paul took it. I guess we're on 1025 East Coda. Is that right?
Hello.
Hi. Your names for the record.
My name is Raymond Costantino. I'm owner and designer of the project.
Anita David, owner, partial owner.
And I'll just start? Okay. So I have some colored renderings that I just wanted to pass around because the one that's attached is black and white. So our project is 1025 East Coda, and it's a 5,000 square foot lot, zoned R2, and we're proposing a single structure on the lot that's consistent of a 1,200 square foot single family residence as well as a 600 square foot accessory unit. And the way we've designed it is that the accessory unit is actually up front on the street, and then the primary residence is actually in the back, and they're connected together with a two-car garage with an outdoor deck above the garage. And another thing that I wanted to mention is that the lot itself is it has an 8% slope, and at the street front on this corner it's 48 feet elevation, and then back here it's 40 feet elevation. So it slopes back, and so the idea is that the front unit, which is the accessory unit, the smaller unit, would give the impression of a single family home, a one-story home, and as it slopes down, the back unit would be 2 stories. The idea behind the design of the house is basically referencing several Mediterranean-style homes in the neighborhood across the street that are kind of modern, modest in proportion, massing and scale, and that's what we're basically referencing as you look at the house at the front of the house. We wanted something more modern than the Mediterranean style, so we're looking at a standing seam metal roof at the rear, as well as some metal awning at the front. It would still be stucco, but with more with windows that had more contemporary lines and less detailing, and then so a style that's more contemporary. Additional, just looking at the site plan, just to kind of walk you through, the house is set back 15 feet, and this is the front entrance to the front unit. Here's the driveway, and it takes you to a 2-car garage. That's they're kind of staggered in order to allow for the turning radius. There's also a parking space that's required for the accessory unit, which is also at the end of the driveway, and then the entrance to the back unit or the primary unit is also here off of the driveway. Looking at the first floor plans, this is where you'll see where that the first floor of the building is actually the back unit, the first floor is on the ground, while the front unit, there's just a crawl space. And then if you look at the second floor plan is where you'll see that, the front unit is all kind of encompassed on that second floor is actually its first floor, and then there's a common outdoor space, which the back unit is actually the bedrooms kind of walk out into that common outdoor space. As far as the roofs, the front unit has a flat roof with a parapet wall. It's also the idea is that it would we would plan for a solar, a PVC system at some point, and also in the back there's a standing seam metal roof. There's also an outdoor staircase to an outdoor area above the primary unit. And then with the elevations, you can see, what it looks like from the front and the back. There's at the front, there's a 3x3 landing that takes you to the front door for the primary unit. And it, I was trying to just kind of gain some of the presence that some of the other porches and across the street also have, even though this house doesn't have a front porch, it just has a landing. There's we have some decorative windows that we're using, one by one decorative windows throughout the different elevations of the house. Here on the west elevation, you can see where the two-car garage is at, and that the deck is right above the two-car garage. You can look at and see where the front entrance to the primary unit is in the back. And there's a pop out here providing some articulation to that wall. On the east elevation, there's an area where there's some shutters that provide some privacy to that outdoor area, that common outdoor area. And then there's some renderings on the last page that I also provided some color renderings. I think I covered what I wanted to say, so I'm open to your comments.
Okay, let us give us a chance to absorb all of the information. Just a
Sure.
second. Yeah, and then we have these. There's these. Oh, you got them. Okay. Look at the rear elevation again. We do have, while everybody's looking at this, we have one public speaker, Leslie Colas.
Hi, my name is Leslie Colas. I'm a neighbor, and I'm also an architect in town. So I came down today and took a look at the drawings just to see what you guys were planning, because I've walked by the parcel a couple times. It's been vacant since I've lived there, and I'm happy to see that something's going up. There were a couple comments that I had. I don't really want to address bulk and scale issues. I'll leave that up to you guys. But I think if this project is to be successful in the neighborhood from a contextual standpoint, that there's a couple things that I'd like to point out in the drawings that cause me concern, and I guess I'd like to bring to the attention of the board so that as the project moves through the process, materials and details are considered. So one of the first comments that I had is I feel like the standing seam roof is definitely out of context for the neighborhood. Typically when you see small brows like this on the small Mediterranean bungalows that are in the neighborhood, they're tile. They're traditional mission tile. Typically nice and thick because a lot of these homes were built back in the 20s. So they've got really nice tile roofs on them. I do appreciate the way the applicant has articulated the parapet. I think that adds a lot to the project. from the front, there is what appears to be, if you look at the, I guess what he would be calling the south elevation, perhaps, or the front elevation of the project, the way what I'll call the on-grade level of the accessory structure cantilevers on the west side, I guess that's what you're calling it, seems awkward to me, and isn't something that we would see at all in the neighborhood, so that causes me some concern aesthetically. The other big issue that was, two other issues that were raised in my mind, if you're familiar with this parcel, it's on a part of Coda Street that descends rapidly as you drop Coda Street. And I know that there's limited control that the board has over whether somebody puts a solar panel on a roof or not, but I have concerns about reflectivity of solar panels with the exposure there as you're descending Coda Street. I think it could actually be a dangerous condition, and so I would support the parapet being substantial enough to, I would rather see a little bit more height and see more parapet there than seeing a low parapet where it may cause a greater problem from that standpoint. I think the shed roof at the back is out of context, but that's not visible from Coda Street, so a little bit less of a concern. I think they're proposing a stucco finish, and I'm a proponent of modern architecture too. I was listening to the conversation with the previous projects, and I can appreciate the desire for something contemporary, but I think that whatever the plaster finish is, it would fit into the neighborhood better if it had a hand quality to it, even if it were a sanded type of plaster or stucco. I think if it were hand finished, it would greatly improve the contextual relationship to the neighborhood. Those are my only comments.
Thanks, Leslie. Okay, questions from the board? Chris? All right, Kirk? Gary?
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't have
Too late. Just kidding.
So I noticed on the elevations, there's some indication of this grade and so on, but then, oh, wait, there is topography. I'm sorry. I got it. Never mind.
Gary? Oh, yeah. Keith?
No questions.
Stephanie? I had one. You touched on it slightly when you started your presentation, when you were talking about liking contemporary architecture. What would you consider this style of architecture, this particular, where were you headed with this?
Well, I wanted to make a reference to the Mediterranean style that's in the neighborhood, but at the same time I wanted to have more of a contemporary
like a soft contemporary.
So contemporary Mediterranean.
Contemporary today, exactly.
Okay.
So, I'm doing that by kind of referencing some of that articulation on the front, parapet, and, and still having some of these kind of pop-out shed roofs. Even on the front, I added some detailing on the windows so that it kind of still referenced that, but at the same time on the other elevations, the windows don't have that detailing, so that it's a little more modern. I also think one of the things that I think is going to be a defining characteristic of the building is the railing, and so at the point where I'm thinking a lot about the railing for the balcony and for the deck area, and how that should be approached, given that it's an opportunity there to see if something can be decorative, but at the same time not be, but still be, clean and smooth and not too, flowery or whatnot. So.
Okay, thanks. Comments? Stephanie, are you ready to make comments?
Sure, I'll start. I would agree with many of the comments that the speaker stated, and that the building doesn't seem to know if it's contemporary or historical, and with the nature of the windows selected on the front of the building and their arrangements, in combination with the stucco elements, I would agree with her characterization of the metal roofing not being in character with the neighborhood, and the awkwardness of the cantilevered portion of the building at Coe Street elevation. The windows seem to be different on every side of the building and not consistent. And the look is not successful.
Keith.
Thanks. I like this little project. I think the site plan totally makes sense. I like the way you're using the topography to minimize the mass, bulk, and scale and have the one story of the street. So I think from the bigger planning perspective, it's all doing the right things. Eventually we'll want to see a landscape plan and development of the paving, but I think we'd want to see some differentiation or designation in the paving that kind of defines a pedestrian path to the rear back door. I kind of like where it's headed, that it's kind of starting out at the street as this kind of humble little Spanish bungalow, and then kind of morphs to the back to this variation with the kind of shed roof and the larger fenestration. So I think the general direction is good. I think you just need to really study your windows and your fenestration patterns and develop a more consistent strategy. I don't think the little small 1 foot square windows are really kind of working for you. So yeah, I would look at maybe more traditional, kind of this era bungalow fenestration or kind of an Irving Gill kind of thing, and then maybe starting there and doing as you're headed, transforming it towards the back. I think that's kind of nice. I think there might be a solution to this kind of awkward cantilever situation here with kind of how you've handled it in the back, and you've broken the corner back and then popped it out as kind of a little saddlebag sort of arrangement. So I think big picture, it's heading in the right direction. I think the fenestration really needs to be studied to come up with a consistent strategy. I think the detailing of the railing, because there's a fair amount of it, should really be considered. But anyway, like I said, I think it's off to a good start. It's just really developing.
All right, Gary.
Yeah, I'm going to echo a lot of those comments.
I'm liking the front street facade actually with the landing and how it mimics some of the neighborhood housing. I do have an issue with the cantilever and the smaller fenestration windows that are above. Particularly, not so much the pop-out cantilever in the back. I think that might need a little bit more articulation, the pop-out one, but the cantilever in the front, it's not working for me, and I'd like to see a solution for that, and I'm sure you can come up with something. I was curious about the railing and how you mentioned that you'd like a modern flair for that railing, and there's so much of it. I'd like to see what that railing would be like, but I would think that you would want to keep it actually a little bit more traditional. And as far as the rear fenestration, I don't know what the neighbor's yard is, and I'd like to see what the neighboring properties are. But it seems to me like that these clear story windows and the shed is is in conflict of what your other building has as far as fenestration goes, and I'd like to see maybe if this is something that is not really in the public view from anywhere, and it's something that you really want, and you're going to get some mountain views from it or something like that, I can understand you wanting it. But if it is in any way something that neighbors are going to see, or any way some type of public view, then I'd be concerned with its style. And
public view meaning street view?
Well, like if it's somewhat on a hillside, so if I'm driving down the street across on another street and I see it, and all of a sudden, it doesn't look like it looks like an addition to a wrong size house, then I have an issue with it. If it's hidden by trees and hidden in a backyard, and you're not going to see it from any point, any public view anywhere, then it's a non-issue for me. That's it.
All right, thanks, Gary. Kirk?
Yeah, I agree with Keith that overall the massing and the approach, basic concept, I think is a good one, and the site layout, and the basic form of the building, I think is a good one, and it's working. But I echo the comments about the metal roof. I think it's not working with the style that you have, and also the parapet detailing. I was just looking at the traditional houses, those really nice little ones that you're mimicking with part of your building, and it looks to me like almost invariably the parapet corresponds to the fenestration. There's a correspondence, a one-to-one correspondence where the pop-up occurs. There's no window, and I noticed on the front, at least, and probably on other sides as well, that's not really happening on your building yet. And also, I agree with the public comment that if you are going to propose solar panels on that front roof, that you've got to find a way to get that parapet higher. And I see that you're right at the ordinance requirement there on the what is that, the south side?
Yeah.
But perhaps there's a way to leave it at that height on that corner, and then find a way to pop it up further as you move along, so you get better protection on other sides, other parts of the building. That's it.
Chris?
Okay. I agree with what the other board members have said thus far, and I would just add that it seems as though maybe the front portion of the house could be lowered. I guess I'm having trouble with the entry and having so many stairs and then ending up on this tiny little 3x3 landing, and that has been the biggest problem for me. It seems like that whole thing could come down. You just have a crawl space underneath.
What I'm trying to do is maintain a common level between the front unit and the back unit for that shared deck without there being stairs at that point. And so that's been my big challenge of trying to have so that both the front and the back can access that shared space on one deck. So that's been I guess the reasoning around that.
Yeah, okay. Well, something to consider. If you end up with a step or two here and there, it might not be a killer. But and then beyond that, I would just look forward to a landscape plan when you come back.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, I agree. I pretty much agree with everybody else. I think it's well cited, and I like the one story in the front and the two story in the back, and I think the massing is appropriate. All the little things about parapet heights and cantilevers, I agree with all those other comments, and particularly with the just everybody else touched on it too. Just kind of looking at the building as a whole, and not each individual elevation separately, and picking a window style and a methodology that is cohesive, and the same with the materials. And then I think you're going to be well on your way. I would maybe look to some kind of definition or description of what kind of garage doors, and when you come back, and little things like, I think this is not really a line here. I think that's supposed to be all stucco, all the way down. So this was confusing me a little. Breakups and things like that. And so I pretty much agree with everybody else. Where are we with this one? We haven't seen it yet, right?
So
It says action may be taken if sufficient information is provided. It doesn't sound like you're going to get approval today, but did you want to say something?
I just have a question just to clarify. So the shed roof, this roof here, that's supported, but it is. I'm not.
Actually, I'm hearing several of the board members, including me, think it's incompatible. I'm hearing that from the board. I don't know how it's going to go in the motion, because somebody is going to make a motion and they're going to itemize.
And is the material the metal piece of that shed roof? Like if it was a material that was more common in the neighborhood?
Probably. I think I'm hearing metal is what some of the members felt was incompatible. Maybe not all. It's not the roof or the slope of the roof.
Okay. All right. Okay. Got it.
So, anybody want to go ahead, Keith?
So this would be a indefinite continuance back to full board with the following comments. Board's supportive of the general site planning layout of the project, and looks forward to development of a preliminary landscaping plan, and including paving design. Applicants to return with photos of the adjacent neighboring structures so that we can get an idea of the relationship to adjacent windows for privacy concerns. The board's supportive of the overall mass, bulk, and scale of the project. Applicant is to study the cantilever of the front unit along the driveway. Also, the applicant is to study the fenestration and come up with a cohesive, unified strategy for the window placement and design. Applicants encouraged to study further the neighboring structures of similar style as far as a cue for detailing of parapet and window awnings, etc. Most of the board feels that the standing seam roofing is incompatible, and the applicant is encouraged to study or come back with other alternatives for the roofing material for that portion of the project.
All right. Seconded by Gary. Under discussion?
Just to indicate where the trash and recycling is going to go on the plan.
Okay. Can add that to the motion, Gloria? Any more further discussion? All right. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And with that, I would like to close the Architectural Board of Review meeting for May 29th. Thank you for listening.